I now call upon the Honourable Manamela.
Bayesawa Makwala, Honourable Chair. Honourable Chair, I don't think that you should have even called me, because my coming here to speak was so dearly announced by the Honourable Hill Lewis, with such an ovation and a red carpet, and basically praising everything that I've been saying in the past. The Honourable Manamela says that young people are tired of speeches, but yet he's giving a speech. And let's forgive him, because you cannot say that young people are sick and tired of listening to speeches when you yourself came here and gave, and maybe that's why you gave nothing short of a speech to this House. Honourable Chair, as we celebrate the 37th anniversary of June 16, I ask that the House also join in celebrating the 34th anniversary of the Congress of South African Students, which was born out of the struggles of Soweto 1976. COSAS was instrumental in introducing many cadres of our movement, some of them members of this august House, into political activism and the demand for social justice and an end to apartheid. We wish COSAS all the best as they venture into new forms of organizing and rallying young people and students in the fight against drugs, teenage pregnancy, and for quality public education for all. Honourable Chair, a celebration of June 16 should not only be about flowery speeches and, yes, we agree, national rallies or annual pilgrimages to the Hector Peterson Memorial. June 16 for all young people and for the ANC as the ruling party should be about what the goals those young people sought to achieve on that particular day. We owe it to that generation of youth and many others who came before and after 1976 and boldly put a mark in the long struggle against apartheid that we reflect the significance of their struggles and whether the current generation of youth lives up to the dreams, ambitions and vision of a better South Africa. June 16 was not only about resistance to language in schools, which was unilaterally imposed by apartheid government on students in order to ferment their colonization and oppression, but it was also about economic freedom and equality in a better South Africa for all. June 16 was about change. In the last 20 years since the dawn of democracy, the 4 successive presidents of our country have led this project for change. The laws which had marginalized blacks, Indian and colored youth in particular from fully participating in the economy have been changed. In theory, all South African youth have equal opportunities. However, the levels of poverty, unemployment, inequality, and economic injustices still remain since 1994, mainly due to the negotiated nature of our transition and the resistance of the dominant economic forces to change. At the heart of change, of the lives of millions of our people lies the economy and therefore economic transformation and ownership. It is through this that millions of young people will see the value of democracy and appreciate the struggles against apartheid and injustices. We will not stop blaming apartheid for our current misery, for we inherited the same poverty it imposed on our parents and also to their parents. And we fully agree that young people should be seen as their own liberators and that young people should be mobilized into action to change the conditions which they find into. The question of ownership and control of land and mineral resources and skewed racial patterns that persist to this day remain indefensible and continues to fuel racial and inevitable economic tensions in our society. This June 16 must be about economic ownership and control of the major resources of our country by all the people equally. This government has done more in 20 years than any other government could have done in more than 3 centuries. And that although the hallmarks of an apartheid society are still prevalent, our youth are not subjected to the same levels of exploitation, segregation, oppression, abuse, influx control or prejudice as was experienced by their parents. Therefore, if there was a time to be youth, it is this time which we're living in as the current youth and as the current generation. This, for the young at heart and the young as defined by age, is a time our country's youth are searching for fresher solutions to the challenges of human modernity. It is at this time, just as many post-colonial and neo-colonial countries faced in their own time, that we begin to ask the questions whether those who secured our democracy 20 years ago built a future that we should be all proud of. It is at this time when we ask the pertinent question, is this what Mandela, Sisulu, Tambo, Hani, Slovo, Kathrada, Motsoaledi, Goldberg, and many others sacrificed their youth for, and even paid with their dear life? But it is also a time when we're called into action to remove the faulty bricks of our democratic accord so as to reshape our country, our economy, and our lives just as the generation of leaders had imagined. You would notice, Honorable Chair in the House, that when I mentioned those who dedicated their lives to the freedom of this country, there was no one who belonged to the so-called Progressive Party, or whatever the DA used to be called in the past. And I think that it is important. It is important that we reiterate the fact that there are people who lost lives for these freedoms that we have. And for people to try and claim and hijack that history in order to put a mantle of being freedom fighters, that must be dealt with. We cannot let that continue. The so-called campaign to wrong the rights of history by the DA, the so-called Know Your DA history, whose main intention is to try and pull wool on the face of our youth, can and will never ever succeed. The youth see what is happening in the Western Cape, and the youth do not want to see it repeated in all other parts of this country. The dream that you will take Gauteng is only a pipe dream. In fact, when many young people in Gauteng hear this dream that you always purport, you make them suffer thousands of nightmares. But we say also that this is that time when hopelessness breeds not the contempt for both our historical oppressors and those who continue to benefit from the foundation they laid, but a time for pragmatism and drastic changes in social, political, and economic superstructure that still resembles the times of the past. This generation, whose birth pains were cleansed with tears of joy for a dawning democracy, a free Mandela, retaining exilees and universal suffrage, has the complex challenge of ensuring that it builds on a future whose past it sees its scars on the face and lives of those who came before. Many have been persuaded that they can do it irrespective of the odds imposed on them by historical injustices, and they have succeeded against all these odds. Many are struggling to make ends meet, albeit many are still lingering in hopelessness, servitude, and poverty, and it is this youth that we should speak for and ensure that our democratic institutions works for them. Honorable Chair, one of the historical imprints of the past was the forced removal and movement of black people from their rural and sustenance economy to go and build the sprouting gold and diamond litters of Johannesburg and other metropolis. This movement has not stopped and has created a culture of urbanization among South African youth as soon as they complete their schooling and as they see no future in the rural economy, that which people in the Western Cape, in particular the Premier of the Western Cape, calls them refugees, unfortunately. It is millions of young people who have populated the informal settlements, the townships, and the city streets in search of quality livelihoods, employment, skills institutions, so that they have the bite on the apple of freedom. Many of them succeed, and in their desperation takes up odd jobs in the mines, in the kitchens, in the gardens, in the corner shops, in the streets as vendors, in the construction industry, and some in the main economic industries. Others fail, unfortunately. And in the quest for the South African dream and miracle, they end up as drug traffickers, as prostitutes, as carjackers, as ATM swindlers, pickpockets, and are unfortunately destined for a life in prison or to an early meeting with the undertaker. This has also resulted in more than 120 service delivery protests nationally because the urban municipalities are unable to cope with the demand imposed on their infrastructure. Yes, our people have the right and freedom to move and should not be constrained and contained from far from the urban life, and that rural life needs to be improved. In the absence of opportunities, possibilities of a better life in the rural areas, these young people, although are forced into a non-violent manner, obviously migrate into the city center. Our government has to invest more resources in the development of our communities in rural areas. We have to invest into agricultural skills. We have to ensure that we invest into skills around education, skills around building quality housing, electricity, water, sanitation, and all of those amenities which are available in the urban areas. But more importantly, we have to support government's NARISEC program, which is led by the Land and Rural Development Department, and also the National Youth Service, which is led by the National Youth Development Agency. There are a lot of young people who have the capacity and skills, who have been trained by this government in agricultural science and all those skills. And we need to invest into those young people so that they're able to contribute towards food production and food security for our economy. For us to hold this migration of young people into urban areas, pushing them into informal settlements and squatter camps, we have to support all the government policies and interventions, including the National Development Plan and the Industrial Policy Action Plan. And in the same vein, remain critical of reports that there's huge wastage when it comes to the whole issue of food security. Honorable Chair, thousands of young people have also thronged to FET institutions as a result of the call made by the Minister of Higher Education that the state will fully pay for their bursaries. And we believe that this is one of the things that we need to invest into and call into young people to go into those institutions as part of making education fashionable. There's nothing criminal about calling for education to be fashionable. And we think that we should collectively, with our communities, ensure that young people love their education. We think that that's very, very critical. We have listened to, for some time, the call that there needs to be a youth minister. And we think that it is a debate that has been there, but in its place, there is a National Youth Development Agency. We are not of the view that youth development should be compartmentalized into a single ministry. Every government department has a responsibility for every young person in this country. Every government department must ensure that it integrates its work and synchronize it with the youth development strategy which has been put into place. And therefore, we do not think that a single youth ministry will help in resolving the major problems that young people are confronted with. The National Youth Development Agency is not, as alleged in the letter that was read by the honorable member from the ACDP, is not an ANC Youth League or a Young Communist League institution. It is politically representative. There is a new leadership which Parliament collectively participated in its appointment. It has already addressed Parliament and the presidency on the kind of changes and interventions that it seeks to see and realize. And we must emphasize that we will be the first one as the African National Congress if the NYDA seeks to represent particular singular political issues or organizations. We will be the first one who would say that the NYDA is belongs to all the young people in this country, irrespective of their political affiliation. The DA starts this House with a statement that says that they do not support the Youth Employment Accord and that it has failed. And we're quite shocked that the DA would say that, because the leader of the Democratic Youth Alliance, of the DA Youth, is a co-signatory of the Youth Employment Accord. Some of the members who are sitting on this bench representing the DA spoke out in support of the Youth Employment Accord. We have consistently said that any intervention that relates to resolving the youth employment crisis we cannot look at a silver bullet, and that we'll have to look at collective proposals which have been put into place. And those collective proposals are contained in the Youth Employment Accord, which are the business sector, the civil society, the trade union and government, including the leader of the DA Youth. And that to want to narrowly suggest that whatever problems that young people are confronted with will be resolved by the Youth Employment Accord is a sham and a mere electoral campaign. Thank you.
That concludes the debate.